Well. I don't know about you guys, but 2024 is gearing up to be a big year, not just for myself, but for none other than Abel Tesfaye, aka The Weeknd. This upcoming album we're reportedly getting isn't just going to be another Weeknd album. It's reportedly the final Weeknd album ever. And with that brings a plethora of expectations, speculations, and rumors. So what better time than the 2-year anniversary of The Weeknd's previous album, Dawn FM, to go ahead and walk through some of these potential rumors that we could be getting this coming year. My name is Pio, I'm standing in front of my closet, and let's get started. Number one, I think it's fair to expect a sick rollout for this upcoming album. Now, in case you don't know, a rollout is the way that an artist leads up or builds up the anticipation for an album. And it is fair to say The Weeknd is right up there with the best of them all time. Of course, we got the masterpiece, the chef's kiss, the piece de resistance that is the After Hours rollout, which I don't need to get into, but I will. Whether it be the pictures in the studio, the first single that we got, Heartless, that perfectly set the tone for what this character was gonna be, the cinematic music videos, of course you got the live performances like SNL, MTV Movie Awards, etc. Then once we got the album, we got even more music videos that really shaped the arc that this After Hours character was going through. Of course you had him all bandaged up for one of his performances before leading into the Save Your Tears music video, where he had unveiled the plastic surgery Chad Weeknd face, of course. The result was this beautiful little thing that all Weeknd fans who were around at the time remember fondly as the After Hours era. But even before that, you got the Kissland era, Beauty Behind the Madness, Starboy, etc. The Weeknd has made a habit of creating moments, creating movies that overarch between reality, music videos, live performances. That brings us to his previous album rollout for Dawn FM, which I think did a great job in kind of resetting our expectations, cleansing our palate, if you will, from the After Hours era and, you know, the iconic, beautiful moment that was. Then we were thrown into Dawn FM, very similar to how the character was just kind of thrown into purgatory. And look, people have their thoughts on the Dawn FM era, as some have called it underwhelming, others, like myself, call it really great. In fact, some of his best work. But it is fair to say that the rollout for Dawn FM was a little rushed, and I do not think we're gonna get that this time around. With it being The Weeknd's final album, I'm expecting the whole 9 yards. People have said that the album could be dropping on his birthday, February 16. I personally don't think that, because I think that would just be kind of doing this final Weeknd album a disservice. Of course, things are, I'm not The Weeknd. I'm sure he has a grand plan for all this. But what I do see in the future is potentially a single dropping February 16, and then album title announcement, just like how we got for After Hours, by the way. We kind of get that rollout throughout the spring, throughout the summer, trailers. We're getting the After Hours Till Dawn tour footage, which could include studio footage of him working on the album. Maybe we hold out, get a couple music videos, a couple more singles, and next thing you know, dagnabbit, we are in the fall. So every Weeknd fan knows that the fall season is a great time to be a Weeknd fan. Now, number two, I think is going to be very interesting, very divisive among the fans, and that is the sound for the next album. Now, OPN has confirmed this album is going to be intense, and futuristic, and that does fall in line with what this After Hours trilogy has been sonically. Now, me, I'm not mad at it. If you are, then so be it. That is you. But for me, I've been having a grand old time. The way The Weeknd has implemented 808, futuristic, alien, sometimes heavenly synths with what we know of with The Weeknd with regards to, lyricism, tone, etc. So I look forward to the culmination of what this whole trilogy is going to be. And I think it's interesting if you compare The Weeknd's first 3 albums with his last 3 albums, and in this case I'll be putting all of the trilogy mixtapes in one basket, because compared to After Hours, which are both these beautiful amalgamations of the Weeknd character that also reinvigorated the R&B and pop scene with something new, then where does Abel go after creating these albums that are unanimously favored among EXO? He subverts expectation by creating such experimental, narrative-driven albums in Kissland and Dawn FM, which are both super comparable in the way that they build an atmosphere and a universe that is so unique. Then you get into Beauty Behind the Madness, which I'd describe as the polished and perfected version of the trilogy sound, with a little tease of what was to come with Can't Feel My Face in terms of the upbeat throwback sound he would go on to dabble in. And I predict we could be getting something similar, as I expect the next album to be the pinnacle of the sound of the After Hours trilogy, as well as a peek of what is to come from Abel Tesfaye. And Dooley Baby, we will talk about that in a bit. Now this next one's a little interesting. I'm very curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this. Now The Weeknd is one of those artists that is able to carry an album all by himself. Look no further than After Hours. In fact, there are some fans who actually would probably prefer it just be himself. But with it being the culmination of the Weeknd character, I think it's only right that we get some really, really important features on this album. And what I mean by important features, I think that these aren't just going to be verses from people we know. I think these are going to be the Weeknd's final goodbyes to certain characters that he, had a very special bond with. Like for example, the rumor mill has been throwing out Lana Del Rey as a potential feature on this upcoming album, which is really interesting because I do remember back in 2015, the Beauty Behind the Madness era, I believe, The Weeknd stated that Lana Del Rey was kind of the muse for his character and kind of who he was writing to, and some of their songs actually felt like responses to the other. Whether or not it was directly inspired by another, it just felt like they were along the same tone, had the same conversations. And of course, you have some of their features like Prisoners, Stargirl Interlude, Lust for Life, which have all been hits in my opinion. I also think it'd be nice to get a future feature. Of course, he's had some amazing features throughout the years, but I do think we could get one nice little verse to kind of cap off the Weeknd's toxic journey. This next one's kind of a pie in the sky feature, but I'm gonna throw it in there just because it's my video, why not? Let's have a Bruno Mars feature because fuck it, These two are beautiful mirrors of each other. The Weeknd kind of represents the later aspect of Michael Jackson, Thriller, whereas Bruno Mars does an amazing job of representing the positivity, the youthfulness, the innocence that is Jackson 5. Michael Jackson, when he was first starting his solo career, they both have that Vegas aesthetic down. I don't know if we're going back there for this album. Like if we get a ballad between these two, I will. And of course, Anita Max Win.
Anita Max Win.
At this point, I don't exactly know if I want the Drake feature, but of course, True Love, The Ride, Live For, that run of Drake and Weeknd features was iconic and beautiful in history when it comes to Torontian history. So I mean, of course, it would just be a beautiful moment to have it on the Weeknd's last album. I know there was that Zane Lowe interview where the Weeknd did say that the reason why you haven't seen Drake and the Weeknd work together is because they want to build it up to be the moment where it's not just Drake and this other artist, it's two juggernauts coming together to create something amazing, and we have been seeing them be buddies lately, but of course those two are quite bipolar when it comes to their relationship, so why not? Let's go ahead and throw in a Drake feature. But yeah, let me know in the comments, who do you think would be a great feature for the Weeknd's last album and why? I want real significant names, and it doesn't have to be the biggest names, but people who have been significant to the Weeknd character, being that this is the Weeknd's final album. Of course, if you want to throw in one that's a really good one that isn't, that the Weeknd hasn't worked with before, then let's do it. But you're definitely gonna have to give me like a little write-up under it. Oh, Ariana Grande, of course. And this next one's gonna be a little bit interesting, so we'll see how it goes. But I think there's going to be a track called Afterlife. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's probably because you listened to Dawn FM and you heard Every Angel is Terrifying, and you heard this teaser for something, this kind of commercial for a product titled Afterlife, which is
intense, graphic, sexy, euphoric, provocative.
Apparently slated to be out of this world and this amazing, cool product that, is bound to take you to new places. So I do think we are going to get a record titled Afterlife that is going to represent a very significant part of the Weeknd's journey. And here's the thing. It's not all speculation, as The Weeknd stated in an interview this past summer that the album title is not what fans have speculated it to be, again, Afterlife, which is the big rumor. But he did throw in a little tidbit at the end where he said that the title that people are throwing around is not the title of the album, it's a title of a song. And so I do think, again, Afterlife could be the first record, the last record. Right now, just total blind guess what number record you think Afterlife is going to be. Maybe it's the big track that culminates everything, that lets us know what exactly this Weeknd character's fate is. So, you know, time will tell. Now, this next one is something that I wanted to save for later on in the video because I do think this is a bigger one, a little bit more abstract, but it's the stuff that I love to talk about. I've talked about this 1,000 times. I'll talk about it 1,001 times because this is what I'm the most excited for with regards to the Weeknd's next album. That is the fact that this is the Weeknd's final album. I do expect closure for the Weeknd character. Now, Pio, what does that mean? Closure. Well, if you look back at the After Hours trilogy where we started off, it is After Hours. It's this Weeknd character who is heartbroken, who relapses, who dies because of his vices and his drug addictions and his codependency in relationships. And then you get to Dawn FM, which is, again, very narrative driven, very story driven. This Sisyphean journey of this Weeknd character rolling this boulder up the hill, looking back at all his past mistakes. And not just from the After Hours trilogy, but even farther back. You go to Beauty Behind the Madness, Kissland days, all the way looking back at even the start of his journey in the trilogy days. Hell, he has a song called Out of Time where he's literally almost looking into a crystal ball and just thinking about all the times that he could have been affectionate and really found love with this one person, but obviously doesn't have that chance anymore. And where that album ends off, which is an interesting thing to say because it is actually a loop. Like, the album represents a loop, almost kind of like Groundhog Day, where he's just gonna keep reliving these moments, sitting and marinating in his sins and vices until he can finally break the cycle, hopefully, with this next upcoming album. But when the Weeknd does break the cycle, is it because he learns his lesson and earns his place in whatever the good place is, heaven? Or I think it's gonna be this interesting futuristic vision of what the afterlife is. Or does he fail? Does he relapse? Does the Weeknd character realize that he is and always will be recognized for his vices? That'll be what I think is the central question for this next upcoming album is, does the Weeknd character deserve absolution? Or is he doomed to stay in this eternal cycle? In a sense, this is kind of the death of the Weeknd. And before we go any further, that's something I want to talk about real quick. Whether you're a Weeknd fan or just a casual listener or just a fan of pop music as a whole, this is the Weeknd's final album. And to that I say, take it in. This dude, the Weeknd, got the most monthly Spotify listeners without even dropping an album this year, beating the likes of Taylor Swift, Harry Styles, Drake, etc., etc. Now, whether you think streams or Spotify stats are a credible thing to cite when discussing an artist's success, you gotta admit that's pretty freaking big in a year where you didn't even drop an album. Again, with this being the Weeknd's final album, I do think he will transition into releasing music as Abel Tesfaye, his real name. That might beg the question, does it matter that he's changing his name? Does it matter that this would be the Weeknd's final album? Well, I think it does. And I think this conclusion is really gonna feel like it because, let's be honest, it already has felt different. If you look at the way the Weeknd started, the kind of music he was making, the things he was saying in his lyrics, he's grown so much over the past couple years. And I think it's fair to say that he deserves to grow past this Weeknd character and approach topics without the expectation of the jadedness, the cynicism that the Weeknd character has, because maybe that's just not him anymore. Maybe having experienced life a little bit more and learning a bit more about himself and maturing, that's just not his mindset anymore. And he deserves to move on and make new music that says new things, that express who he is currently. And maybe that'll be the Weeknd character's lasting legacy. Maybe he can serve as an inspiration to all of us that, despite who we may have been in the past and the things we've done, that by reflecting on our actions, accepting the consequences, and doing the work, we can all be better and do better. And because of that, I think we need to really appreciate what we're getting here, and that is the final statements of this Weeknd character. All that to say, I am very excited to see where the Weeknd character lines up, what his storyline culminates with, and what he has to say about sinners and people who fall in love with their vices. That being said, please go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter at Pio's Place. Go ahead and check me out on Playback as well. That's something that we'll be doing a lot more this year. We're gonna be streaming, we're gonna be hanging out, watching videos together, discussing, talking about stuff. So, you know, of course, when the Weeknd starts rolling out this last album, we will definitely be talking. I would love to call some of you guys up, have a real discussion with y'all. So again, playback.tv/Pio's Place. And is there anything else? TikTok at Boozy Affogato. And again, this has been Pio's Place. Y'all are welcome back anytime, but until that next time, Take care.